you're gonna look great. But if you wanna stay in shape, well, you better hit the Gymwits.
That's right, man. Tell 'em. Welcome to the Gymwits podcast. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, a.k.a. Chef Sonic.
And we are the Gymwits. So, Justin, how has your exercise been going? I know we talked a few weeks ago. I gave you a plan. You said you were going to stick to it, get into exercising again.
It went really, really well for a while, only for the last maybe 5 days. I've been incredibly busy with work, so I haven't really been able to work out, but that's only been for a few days. But the rest of it's been really well. Like I've been, lifting. I've been a lot stronger. I've added a lot more muscle and stuff. So yeah, it's
Very good. Because as you know, our friend Misha challenged you, and to an exercise, getting back into exercise thing, and he's been back. He's been back.
That's awesome.
Once a week. So
very good.
So you got to get back, get on the ball.
Yeah. I've gotten so much stronger. Like I'm lifting, and like I can see it. One other thing. So, how do you feel?
Full.
Aha.
Yeah.
Well, I decided to cook for Ryan today. It was his birthday on Sunday, and we didn't get a chance to hang out.
Yeah.
So I made Ryan's favorite food, which is steak.
Yeah.
And how was the steak?
It was good. It was a really good steak. It was huge. It was a lot, but
so we don't eat like that every day, but today.
No, good steak is good. And I guess one more thing before you end the episode, I have good news for you.
Okay.
they ended the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu program at the gym.
Okay.
Now, why is that good? No, that isn't good news because I'd finally in January started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. For those of you who don't know, Justin's been doing it for a long time, and
sort of off and on,
but he's been doing it for a while. That and judo, and I just started in January, and I was starting to make some progress. Like I was finally starting to figure it out, and they ended the program. And the reason why that's good news for Justin is he's been worrying that I'd be I'd at some point get to where he's at, and so it was concerning him a little bit, kind of half jokingly that my skills would get somewhere close to his level. But now that they ended the program and I don't have time to go find a new gym, I don't know that I'll be able to do it for now. I definitely want to get back into it sooner than later because it is a lot of fun, and I was making progress. And like the week before, I was finally getting to the point where I was like able to use my I'm a decent athlete, and I was able to use the athleticism along with whatever skills I had learned. I was able to combine the two, so I was actually making a good deal of progress for me in the last few weeks, and now there's no program, so I had to figure something out.
Always goes that way, right? As soon as you get into something, as soon as you start getting good, it ends.
Yeah, so I'll figure something out because I do want to get back into it, although my next project will be learning how to swim because I can't swim.
I can help you with that.
Well, I'm going to, the gym I'm at, we have like an 8-week swimming program.
So
great. It's just for me, any new skill like that is I've got to commit to it. So
swimming's good.
Yeah. My wife can't swim either, so we're going to do it together. So we'll kind of do an activity together.
That's a good activity.
So, yeah, I've had people try to teach me. I have a hard time. So we'll figure it out.
You'll get it.
All right. So what's today's episode?
Today we have another Ask the Trainer. We have a bunch of cool questions that have come in, and Ryan is going to do his best to answer them, and I'm sure I'll chime in with whatever advice I can give as a fitness enthusiast.
All right, well, what's the first question?
So the first question we have today is from Nasim, and it is, let me see here. I have been trying to increase my muscle tone, but I read and hear conflicting info. Some people say high reps and low weight, while others say heavy lifting. What should I do?
That's a very common question. I'm sure we've gotten some variation of that question.
It's funny that this is still around, that these
That makes sense. Well, he explains it. Some people say, you'll read one thing and then you'll read something else in magazines. And I think if you're not, or online, and if you're not in the industry or in the know, it's hard to decipher what's legitimate and what's not. So I think it's totally a reasonable question because we get conflicting information out there.
The issue is I just don't know how this is still out there, how this information, I thought everyone debunked the myth, these myths like years ago. I remember I was told that by my high school gym teacher.
Oh, these things.
I was in the 90s.
Yeah, these things die hard. Die a hard death. I mean, there's so many myths out there that are still prevalent. So
plus, it makes. If you think about it, it sort of makes sense. Like there's, those things with fitness that you have in your head. You think something, or you hear something and you think that it's true for no reason. Like, it sort of makes sense in your head. Oh, if I do more reps, my muscles will get rounded, and if I lift heavy, they'll get bigger.
Yeah.
Right? Somehow in our brain, we hear these things and we think that they make sense for arbitrary reasons. But we're going to find out the truth right now.
Well, the truth is, again, as usual, it's a little bit person specific, but generally, when we talk about muscle tone, where you don't kind of change the shape of your muscles, you don't shred muscles. Like that's a myth. People, and that's common. And again, magazines, like everyone wants to have good definition. They want the muscles to look nice. So we hear a lot about toning the muscles, and this exercise will do that. And you put this belt on, it'll tone your abs and all this stuff. So it's you always hear muscle tone, and it's a word that's kind of part of the fitness jargon, and it's here to stay, and it won't change. But basically, what muscle tone typically refers to is some combination of muscle, higher muscle and lower body fat. That is what's going to give you muscle tone. So you have two options. You either increase the size of your muscles or you decrease the amount of body fat. That's how you're going to, enhance the tone. Now there's other things like, you see, how much you see if you're pumped. Like, if you go and work out, you're going to see your muscles better than if you're not, because you're pumped up, there's blood flow. If you have low body fat, you're going to see things more than if you don't. So you may have two people, one who's more muscular than the other, but they also have more muscle, they have more body fat. So you're going to see it's going to be less defined if you have more muscle and more body fat. So, anyway, in order to increase the muscle tone, as far as weightlifting is concerned, the high reps won't do much. So
what does high reps do?
It works muscle and more muscle endurance. Yeah, so it's going to build the endurance. I'm going to change that a little bit. I think if you're doing if you're doing high reps but very fast and kind of at a high intensity, I've found, and this is anecdotal, I've found that it does help with like kind of muscle size and definition to a small extent. So you're not going to build huge muscles doing high intensity interval training. But if you're doing lower rep, like for me, I don't lift weights much anymore, but like my legs are bigger than they were when I lifted weights, like lifted heavy weights. And for the most part, I'm not much smaller than I was when I was lifting weights, but I do a lot of high intensity interval training. So I'll do things that are, a lot of reps, but it's really fast. So you're exhausting yourself. So I've found personally that as far as maintaining muscle and even building a little bit, and for myself and for some clients, that has shown to have some benefits. But you're not taking 5-pound dumbbells and doing 20 repetitions. You're doing it really fast with you're doing your reps really fast for a short period of time, then take a short break.
It's more of an athletic.
Yeah.
For athletic
There's
purposes.
more conditioning, which we'll talk a little bit more about working on an episode where we're going to deal with different types of endurance and how it, regular, kind of a marathon is different from sprints and what your goals are for endurance. But that's beside the point. I think the idea being the intensity of the work has to be high if you're going to do low reps. So if you do low repetitions and I do 1, 2, 3 up to 20 and I put the weights down, and that's not going to do
high repetitions.
High repetitions. I'm sorry. If you do 20 reps and then you put the weights down, it's different from doing 20 seconds of all out as fast as you can and then you rest for 10 seconds and you do another 20 seconds and then that's different. So I do think there's something to be said for high intensity interval training with low weight, but your standard, I'm going to take 10 pounds and I'm going to do 30 curls, that's not going to help you much for building muscle, but it will help you with muscle endurance to an extent. But you have to consider what do you need the muscle endurance for. So if you're training for a sport or an activity that requires endurance for that specific area, great, but if not, then it may not really be benefiting you that much.
I think for people that are more concerned with aesthetics, such as Nassim is interested in, we would probably say heavyweight.
Well, yeah, moderate to
maybe
heavy.
Not necessarily crazy heavyweight, but you would probably recommend 12
it's
to 8
the standard
reps.
thing that we've been doing, that bodybuilders have been doing for, 60, 70 years. High volume, heavy, moderate to heavy weights.
And that means heavy for you.
Yeah.
Heavy is different. So if you're doing a bench press and you max out at, say, 180, right? Or 175, you would want to do, 135, a good, if you could get maybe 12 reps of that would be solid. Boost it up a little bit, 10 reps, 155, 160. Then if you get up to 175 or 180 and you can churn out, I guess a max would be a little bit more than, like, a max is when you can only do one.
Yeah. Well,
so
yeah, I mean, the different, if you're
but
dealing with
you want to do around your weight. Now, do you want to completely go to exhaustion every time?
No.
Okay.
No, but
'Cause that's some other conflicting.
that's
info.
different. So, but yeah, not important right now to talk about. The main thing is your rep range isn't. You're not going to be at your one rep
At your one rep
max,
range,
and you're not necessarily going to want to go to exhaustion. You want to go close to exhaustion when you're dealing with building size, but you don't necessarily always or even regularly want to get to exhaustion. So, but the rep range should be in the 8 to 10, 8 to 12 rep range, but you do need to be if you're at the at your 8th rep, it's got to be hard. Like getting a 9th rep, while you don't want to go to failure, getting that 9th rep would be incredibly tough. So that's the idea, is that when you get to the end of your rep range, that doing another one would be really, really hard. Yeah. And so if you're training in that range, again, that 8 to 10, 8 to 12 rep range, and doing high volume. So you're doing,
what do you mean by high volume?
High volume. So basically, the volume of work is going to be, what are the variables? The variables are the amount of weight, times the amount of repetitions times the amount of sets. So high volume of work it's very simple. One of the first things you learn when you're going through certification is just it's the amount of work you're doing. So it's going to be 4 to 5 sets per exercise. 4, 5, 6 exercises per body part. Again, it depends a little bit on the personal goal. So now, let's say for Nassim, and this is where it becomes person specific. Let's say he's got a good deal of size, but his problem is more that he has body fat. Then for him, he may not need to be as focused on building muscle as much as he's going to need to focus on cutting the body fat. Versus if he's very skinny or has lower muscle mass and maybe he's a little bit of body fat, or maybe a little slow to medium body fat, then the focus might be more on muscle building. So I think that becomes a little more, or some combination. So depending on your body type and where you're at, you're going to have to make the decision of whether your focus needs to be more on losing body fat or building muscle. So, it's hard to do both at the same time.
Yes. So if Nassim is big already and he just wants to get cut or ripped or any of those terms, you would say go into more of a losing, like a cut it phase.
Yeah, then it's going to be the focus will be more about diet, cardio. Still weights, like the weights are still incredibly important. I think some people, when they want to lose weight, just disregard the weight training altogether, and that you can't do that. Now, if you're muscular enough and the focus is on body fat, then you can be more, the weight training can be more maintenance. You could do circuit training, you could do just a standard weight training protocol, but just not focus on pushing the weight. So the other part that I didn't mention with the weights, in addition to being focused on volume and that rep range, it has to be progressive. So if you're not constantly increasing certain variables throughout, again, I mentioned the variables, right? The weight, the weight you're the amount of weight you're lifting, the amount of repetitions, the sets, the reps, all those together. If you're not increasing some or all of those variables, I guess outside of the reps, we want to keep the rep range in that 8 to 10, 8 to 12 rep range. But the other variables should increase. If those aren't increasing over time, then I'm going to change that. The sets and the reps should generally be around the same. So you're doing 3 to 5 sets, 8 to 12 reps. But
the weight.
If you're not increasing the weight that you're doing, or the amount of exercises, so that those two will help you increase your total volume. If you're not increasing those, then you're not going to make progress. So if the goal is to build, then in addition to following the increase, having the high volume, you need to be progressive. So it needs to increase over time. The other aspect, though, if you're big enough, then you got to focus on the diet and the cardio. Then have to be the most important thing, because even if you have big muscles and a lot of the musculature, it's not going to show if you have the body fat. And then also keep in mind that
do a whole podcast on this.
Yeah, we could. Yeah. So I'm just gonna. I think we did a whole podcast on this anyway. But the other thing to keep in mind is looking like don't for some people it's like, I want to look like the guy in the magazine or whatever, and the guy in the magazine doesn't look like the guy in the magazine. So oftentimes like the bodybuilders or the people you see on the fitness magazines, A, it could be photoshopped, and B, for them, it's like an athlete. Like an athlete has to train to be at a certain physical condition to meet whatever physical requirements they have for that sport on that day. The fitness model is doing the same thing. So they've got to be they're training for that photo shoot or for that, whatever they're doing.
And there's all the technical lighting.
Event. So yeah, exactly.
They grease them up. They do all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, like you could take two people,
crazier.
Watch Bigger, Faster, Stronger is a great documentary on steroids, but they do. There is a part that deals with kind of how the supplement industry can mess with you, and they take a guy. He in the same day they can make him look fat and make him look fit just based on lighting and how you make them up. So. When it comes to looking like that, there's certain sacrifices you have to make, and it's very hard unless you kind of have it genetically or you suffer. It's very hard to look like ripped. What we think of as like the ripped, fitness guy. It's hard to look like that all the time, and there's sacrifices you have to make. So just keep that in mind too. Again, we could do a whole episode on this. I hope this helps. So let's get to the next question. Well, do you have any other questions? Or that's
great stuff.
All right. So what's the next question?
All right. The next question is from Sam, and it is: I have a marathon coming up, but I was recently diagnosed with a torn meniscus. The doctor recommends surgery, physical therapy, and that I should skip the run. She thinks that it can possibly make the injury worse. I've been training my ass off the last 14 months, and I don't want to quit. Interesting word. Do you have any experience with clients in a similar positions? Any tips that you can share?
All right. Well, first thing is you should listen to your doctor. That's what I'm going to get that out of the way first, because if a doctor recommends, you want to listen to doctor's recommendations and not mine. I will tell you experience. I can give experience with clients because I do know people that have been in similar situations. It's funny, we did an episode with the studies where we talked about meniscus tears, and that often they don't require surgery. So
that's a separate issue.
That's a separate issue.
Yeah.
Don't listen to us on that. But
I think any way you look at it, doing the run is going to make it's
a risk reward type of a thing, and this really comes, I think, if I were to give advice, and again, my initial advice is listen to your doctor, because it's going to get worse. Like, basically, I would say this: you're probably going to make the injury worse. Like that's it doesn't take a doctor to know that, and it doesn't take an expert to know that, or a fitness expert. In generally marathons are can be pretty taxing on the body. If you train properly and you're able to make the training work, and you have the experience, you can mitigate that to a large extent. I know marathoners who are deal with injuries all the time, and I know marathoners that almost never have injuries. I'm going to make the assumption, just based on the way that this was written, that Sam is not an experienced marathoner. I'm just get the feeling that but I could be wrong, because I think somebody who's done it before probably has the experience and knows enough people and has been through it to make that decision. But I'm just making the assumption, and also like that you've been training. I know people have been through this, and the first time especially, you train so hard for that you don't want to not do it. Yeah. So again, this is just a complete assumption. I have no idea, but I know the feeling of training for something and then having it cancel or stopping it. So you just have to kind of go into this with the mindset of you're probably going to get hurt, and what's that worth to you? And I've had clients that have been through this, and know people who've been through this, and so this is a personal decision. It's that am I going to make the injury worse? What I would probably talk to the doctor or I would say you want to talk with a specialist who deals with athletes, specifically runners, and find out what's the worst case scenario, and how bad is the marathon going to affect your everyday life afterwards. If you go into it if you know you're going to get surgery later, find out am I going to make it that much worse by doing the run and getting the surgery after? And then also you have to consider your own pain tolerance. Are you going to be able to tolerate, A, does it hurt? And B, how much pain are you going to be able to tolerate? Because it's a long, it's 26 miles. Like, can you manage that for the entire time, for the 3, 4, 5 hours, however long it's going to take for you? Can you manage that pain? And then are you willing to deal with the consequences? Find out again what the worst case scenario is. And then if you're willing to deal with the consequences, then go for it. But go for it understanding that it's probably going to make the situation worse.
And I want to say one thing. I'll mention it again. You mentioned the word quit. I don't want to quit. You're not quitting. That's not quitting. Quitting is I don't feel like doing it. I don't care what Ryan says, right? Quitting is not quitting is not I'm injured and it's bad for me. Quitting is, I don't feel like doing it. It's just too hard. I'm just not, I don't feel like working today. Right? That's quitting. Or quitting is the day of, I'm scared. I'm not going to do it. That's quitting. Quitting is not, you have a torn meniscus that could be a devastating injury that could really, you've been training your ass off, but maybe this might put you on your ass for a long time, right? Or much longer if you decide to do it, and it makes the injury worse. So you are not quitting. In fact, you've done great work already training for 14 months, right? Now, another thing, if you have the surgery and you go through PT, that 14 months will not be wasted. It was still good for your body. You still became a better runner. You got in better shape, right? You got stronger mentally. It's not like it's erased. Having surgery and being out of commission for however long you're out of commission for will not erase those 14 months.
Yeah, but I understand.
I understand that it sucks to not be able to do something,
Yeah.
but you're not a quitter. If you get injured, you're not a quitter. It's just not. That's just not what it is.
It's funny. I'm not sure whether Sam is a male or female.
Yeah. I wasn't
I'm
sure.
trying to, so I understand the use of the word, and it
Sure.
makes sense. And I don't think, having been through similar situations, like having not 14 months, but you train really hard for a fight, you put all of yourself into it, and then you get injured and you can't do it, and you have to call out. There's frustration, and I don't know that I'm assuming that Sam. I'm gonna assume it's a woman, but it could be a guy. But I don't think that Sam is viewing herself as a quitter, so much as like I don't think in there, like, the mindset is like the disappointment because I'm a quitter.
We don't know
but-
that. That might be. Might think that. Oh, I can work through this, and if I don't work through this, I'm a quitter.
Well, obviously that's part of the attitude is I want to work through this, and am I going to hurt myself? I think that's what she wants to know is should I go through with it? I want to do this, so I don't think that I think I'm trying to figure out how to formulate. I think that
what the guy did when you fought, when you trained for the fight, you got in there, and when
No,
you
but not
ran
that.
up to
No,
the
I'm not
guy
talking about
and
that.
he
I'm
kicked
talking
you in
about-
the
I
leg,
remember- no.
and he fell to the floor faking an injury. That's quitting.
Okay, yeah, but I think we're just arguing over a word. Like we're I don't think that. The mindset. I think you train so hard for something. There's frustration with not being able to do it.
Course.
It's
Terrible. It sucks.
So I think
awful.
I don't think that it's about I don't think that she's thinking of herself as a quitter. So it's kind of she's looking for confirmation or somebody to basically say don't do it, and it's okay not to do it, rather than dwelling on being being a quitter. I'm not figuring out. I'm not articulating
if
this
you
right.
want to use the word quit as just as mean, I don't want to not do it anymore.
Yeah,
Then yes,
I
the word
think
quit.
that's the
Fine.
way it's being used.
But that I'm not. But we can't be sure.
We can't be sure.
So the word to me, quit, is very interesting because when I think of quit, I think of giving up willingly.
See,
this
I
is
don't.
not willingly. Okay, well that's fine. Whatever. But to me, if that's what it means, where you're giving up. If quit just means you just want to not do it, means you can't do it for whatever
Which is
reason.
obviously not. Right? Like, it's obviously not just
But
not
we
doing
don't know.
it.
I mean, Sam, we don't know if when you say quit, if there's an implication of you can do it anyway, regardless of an injury, and fighting through an injury, a potentially devastating injury. If you don't fight through it and you don't potentially put your body in harm's way, you're quitting.
Well, we commonly hear people say no pain, no gain, or I'll just fight through it. All the time I have people I had a woman who have been training for years, and it's like her husband had knee surgery, and somehow it came out that her knees have been bothering her for a year, which she never brought up. And well, why didn't you tell me? Why do you do there's certain things I wouldn't have you do if I knew your knees were hurting? And she's like, whatever. I just have to fight through it. I don't want to be a.
But we've talked about that. We know there's fighting through it. You're tired. Maybe you're sore. There's the good fighting through it, and then there's the bad fighting.
So I think that if
you're injured, that is the bad fighting.
So I think what Sam is looking for is whether or not this is something that she's capable of fighting through. maybe she's saying, like, the doctor's telling me not to do it. I don't want to be a quitter. Is this something that I can fight through, or is it not? And that's just how I'm taking it. I just think you're a little too hyper focused on the word quit, and we don't quite understand the context. And certainly in this case, I think either she's looking for somebody to say just do it, or somebody to confirm, like, look, it's bad, don't. But I don't know. I just don't think in this case that the word quit is a bad
negative.
Well,
yeah. Okay, so. If you could do a lot, we can do a lot of things. Just because we can do something doesn't mean we should, right? Yes, we can fight through an injury. Yes, we can, we have free will. We can do whatever we want. But if we choosing to do the smart thing, the safe thing, right, doesn't detract from work that you've done. So the important thing, and it doesn't make you, and it doesn't in any way make you someone who has given up. You're not giving up.
Yeah, but that's where I say it is a risk reward thing. So you have to know. I think it's important to be aware of the implications, and it's important to be aware of what the cost is going to be of running. Because again, any time you train for something that is that taxing and that takes that much work, it's really difficult mentally to not do it, to not follow through with it for whatever the reason. She could have broken her femur, and where she absolutely couldn't run, and there's no question it still is devastating. So the question then becomes, what is the value of actually seeing this through and completing it? Is it worth whatever potential further damage that you can do? And that is a personal thing. So that's where I say, like, I would talk to somebody who is an expert on, talk to an orthopedist if you haven't, or talk to somebody who deals with runners, who's dealt with this and who understands the knee, and make the decision, figure out what's worst case scenario, what's most likely to happen, and how much worse is it than would that be than it is now. If the doctor says, like, look, if you can fight through the pain, it's not gonna get that much worse, and we'll still get the surgery, then go through with it if you can handle the pain. But if they say that there's significant damage that you can do for whatever reason, going through with it, then you have to really consider that, because then it has long-term effects. Like, you completed the marathon, great, but are you willing to then deal with something that could be lifelong? Maybe you repair the meniscus and you're back to normal, and then you run the marathon next year.
That one injury can lead to other injuries as well.
Or you compensate. Exactly. Well, that's the other thing, is, like, let's say it's incredibly painful, then you start favoring the other leg, and then you do damage to the hip and to the knee of the other leg, which I've seen, which is very easy to happen. I've seen that happen often. So there are lots of potential injuries that could happen just as a result of going through with this. So I'm not saying do it, but I'm saying talk to an expert, and then you have to decide what the risk, is the risk worth the reward of finishing the marathon.
Yeah. And just one last thing on this subject, Sam. We as a listener, we care about you, and we care about all our listeners. We want everyone to be healthy and fit and just live a very good quality of life. Think about this: if you do choose the surgery and then go through physical therapy, you can still do another marathon. And imagine,
that's not easy to hear.
I know, but imagine how you will feel if you go through all of it and then you complete a marathon afterwards. You'll feel like now you've conquered so much. So just a thought, but good luck in whatever you choose.
I doubt that will
and write us in.
Size,
well,
but
it is. Well,
that's a good point. It's a very good point, but it's
of course it's
tough.
Not as solid, of course. But anyhow, Sam, write us in. Let us know what you choose, and we're here to support you in the best we can.
Cool.
All right. So our next question comes from Deva, really interesting name, and it is, "Hi, I have a 13-year-old son who is completely inactive. He spends most of his free time reading or playing video games. He's a good kid and hardworking as far as his academics are concerned. He is just unmotivated to move. On a recent episode, you mentioned that you work with teens, and I was wondering if you have any advice on getting him active. Thanks a lot, and keep up the great work." And thank you, David, for writing in. This is a great question, and we'll certainly give the best advice we can.
All right, so we both have experience working with teens. it's a challenge. I've definitely seen many situations. I'll give a little a personal anecdote.
It's funny. There's almost
later.
two aspects to this question.
So, the first thing I would say, is be a good example. So beyond anything you're going to try to do, which, we'll give you some ideas, you have to set a good example. So you have to be active yourself, and you have to, whether it's, if you can work out, great. If you're not working out, which some people, if you have your family and work obligations, it's tough, but try to set as good of an example as far as activity and being healthy and eating, as much as you can. If you're a good example, he'll follow. And also another thing to do is plan activities for the family, if you can, or for you and your son, that will allow you to again, that are active. So you can do things that involve moving around, whether it's doing a hike or doing some kind of activity around your city where you're running around the city, or you're going to the park, or you're playing sports. So if you can actually schedule and set up things where you're actually active together, that might help. I guess I'll give one thing for me. I'll give a quick personal anecdote to explain how this works. My wife, so we met my stepkids were 11 and 13, I think, or 10 and 12, and my stepson especially was very inactive and very similar to Deva's kid, in that he just played video games all the time. I don't know how great he was with academics at the time. He's gotten better, but at the time, I don't know that he was super motivated with that. But he wasn't very active. And when we'd go on vacation, and when we would just do things out in the city, we were very active. So on vacations, we were hiking a lot. Anything we did involved a lot of walking, a lot of moving. And then things that we do in the city usually involved us walking around the city, going to the park, different activities that really made sure we were moving. So even though he didn't love it, and would complain a lot of times, especially on vacations where we were just all over the place, we set a good example for him. And obviously I'm in fitness, so I'm just naturally setting a good example from fitness. So anyway, fast forward, he finally found an activity he liked, which was boxing, and he loves that. He hates the gym. He doesn't go to the gym to do anything unless it revolves around boxing. So for example, when he started boxing, now he's 21. So when he started boxing, I think he was 18 when he started, and he would just go the 2 days, 1 day a week to boxing. So the boxing class at that gym is 2 days a week, or so he'd only go 1 day a week. But then he really got into it, so he started just going to boxing twice a week. Then he started to realize, well, if I run more, if I get my running in and increase my cardio, that'll help me keep my endurance during the boxing classes. So then he started running. So he'd come early to boxing class just to go for a run, then take class. And now actually he's been asking me lately about weightlifting. It's wait, so will squats help? Will deadlifts help? What kind of exercises can I do? So now all of a sudden, someone who hates the weight room, he's starting to ask me about using the weight room, because again, he wants to do things that'll help his boxing. So, this goes into my, I guess, second point, is finding an activity that he will like. So you're probably not gonna get him to love going to the gym. I mean, one option you can do, which parents do with me, which is why I have these classes, that they just sign their kids up for fitness classes and they send the kids have to go. So that's one thing you can do. In that way, you're kind of forcing fitness on him, which, it's better than nothing. And if you have a good instructor, a good kind of dynamic instructor, not that I'm either of those, but if you have a good instructor, they'll at least get them working for that time. And I have my own strategies for dealing with, I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but I have my own strategies for kind of working with unmotivated kids, or kids who don't like activity. And so that could be an option too. Again, it's a little more aggressive and you're kind of forcing it on them, and the easier way is to kind of
actually could have detrimental
potentially. Again, if it's a good instructor, it won't. It at worst it'll be even. It won't have a bad effect, but you may not get them to love exercise. But the better thing to do is try to find an activity that they like, whether it's swimming or boxing or whatever it is. So maybe give them choices, or have them try things out that they might like. So I think that's the other option. Now I know Justin's chomping at the bit to throw in his 2 cents.
It goes sort of hand in hand with what Ryan was saying about the importance of finding something that they like. I know that Ryan feels like that it's sometimes good to throw the kid in, and I would agree, depending on the kid. So now, while I'm not an expert in kids fitness or teen fitness, what I am an expert is in teen motivation. I've taught lessons for years, and I've seen kids be motivated. I've seen kids taking, I teach guitar and drums, general music as well. So I've dealt with kids coming in who are very motivated, kids who are very unmotivated. And we'll, in a little bit, I'll get into why kids may or may not be motivated for something. So, but briefly back to what Ryan said about getting the kid into something that he enjoys. Very, very important. So you could just throw the kid in. Now, here is the issue with that. What is his reason for not being motivated? Is he just physically lazy? That's a possibility. And in which case, the just throwing him in wouldn't be a terrible idea. There could be other reasons why he is not motivated. It could have to do with confidence. He may feel that he is not very adequate when it comes to physical activity. He may be very embarrassed around other kids. He may feel, oh, I'm not good at sports. So it may not even be his motivation may it may manifest as lack of motivation, but it could be that he is uncomfortable participating, which then it's really important that you get something that he's into. Or maybe he doesn't like being by himself. Maybe he really enjoys the idea of being with other kids his age and doing something. And to find that out, from personal experience, I feel that it's very good to make him feel as if he has chosen the activity that he wants. Certainly experiment with a lot of them. If he feels too pressured, and I've seen this from students that have been forced to take an instrument. Now, I teach guitar, so most of the students that I have want to be there. They want to learn that instrument. Sometimes kids will come in and be unmotivated, and then I'll always remind them, hey, you're here because you want to be here. No one's forcing you to be here. And then the students will almost always perk up after that. By allowing him to choose or making him think he's choosing, he will immediately feel better about doing it. He will not feel pressured. I have seen students that are overly pressured by parents to do something that they do not want to do, and maybe for a little while it could work, but I found that in the long term, it's crazy. I've been doing this almost now for 20 years. It almost freaks me out that I say that. It usually does not work out. Once in a while, the kid will come around and say, oh, I'm good at this, or I'll do it. Most of the time, if they are overly pressured into doing something, but it sounds like you are very supportive, which is great. Always show that you are supporting him in the activity or whatever it is that he chooses. So certainly what Ryan said is showing great example, so important when if he sees you either being involved in fitness, setting schedules for activities, stuff like that, it will inspire him. And also allowing him to choose a good activity, experimenting with him a lot, showing him support in that. And then, of course, Ryan also mentioned something, and that's getting a good instructor for whatever it is. That cannot be undervalued. Now, I know that Ryan says sometimes when you get kids in that are unmotivated, and he has strategies for that, that's important. I think it even runs deeper than that. That the kid, depending on why he does not want to be into it, maybe he's uncomfortable, or maybe there's social aspects that play into it. By having an instructor that is friendly and someone who your son can actually relate to and even befriend will be so valuable, because he will associate this sort of the good-natured personality of the instructor with the activity.
So,
and that's that's important. So by enjoying the company of a good instructor, not to mention that you want the instructor to be good at what he does as well, or what she does. So that would be my advice.
So to chime in on that, the little challenge with that is, having dealt with people that are teens that are unmotivated, I have strategies to get them to exercise when they're with me, so they're active. The only problem is it is somewhat kind of superficial. So unfortunately, for the unmotivated kids,
and that will happen. That it's
what's
only
really,
around you.
Yeah, it's really hard to get them in on their own. Where you'll have the motivated kids who are they'll follow a schedule. So that is a challenge. That's why it's important to me to find an activity that they do like and a reason to keep coming into the gym rather than, oh, my parents are forcing me. Because like I said, I can get them to go from not wanting to do anything to doing something for that hour, where what's challenging though is getting them to want to come back and do it. And that's where they need to connect fitness to something. I think as adults, we either start focusing on more on our health or aesthetics more so than teens do. So we will exercise, we'll do it even if we don't want to, because we know that it's going to, there's the cause and effect and we want that. Whereas a kid, for him, it's just like, I don't like this, I don't want to do this, but my mom wants me to do it, so I'm going to do it. You know, and then if you have a good instructor, they'll be able to kind of get you to work. But it is a challenge to get them
if they enjoy the company of the instructor or the other kids that are doing it, that might encourage them because it becomes a social thing.
Well,
it becomes something that they enjoy doing, partially because of the social
So that's
aspect.
something you touched on.
I know that some kids will take guitar lessons with me. It's funny, just because they like hanging out with me, that maybe they didn't even want to do it so much at first, but after I sort of brought them in, they just enjoy the company, and that's okay for a start once they get into it. Now,
but
maybe it doesn't last.
But it's not lasting, because if you're not there, they don't.
It's true, but you got to start somewhere.
Okay, no, so that's the thing. It can be effective, but if they're unmotivated, it may not cure that. Now, you mentioned a couple things. The social thing is important. I think what I'm thinking, again, this is just more speculation, but kind of based on my stepson as an example. Part of his lack of motivation, he played video games all the time. He's playing video games with his friends. So that's, all of his friends, they're all online playing games together. So they're communicating with each other, where when we were kids, we were wrestling or playing football or something, because that's how we had to socialize.
We had plenty of video games too.
We have video games, but the difference was, like, for us to play video games together, we had to be I had to go to your place, or you had to come to my place, or we'd have to, we have friends over. But otherwise we were playing by ourselves. So for them, a significant amount of social time is playing video games with their friends. They have their headset in, they're all playing together, they know each other, they're not physically with each other, but they're all together playing. So that part of it, to me, so often it's less about self-esteem and more about, well, hey, this is we can socialize doing this. So one other thing is to consider
is more about physical. Like some kids feel very
that's what I mean.
Weird when it comes to physical activity.
But I think, again, for teens, I think this is more of an issue with girls that I
That's
as
very
far
possible
as
too.
what I've noticed. But it is an issue. But I think boys won't be quite as self-conscious, especially if it's more of a fitness setting. I think it's different if it's like, hey, you guys are going to play basketball and you're like and you're not.
Sport.
Yeah, if it's like, hey, we're going to be playing football and you're the one that's last picked, like that never feels good. But if it's just about being fit or exercising, I don't think the self-esteem is as much of an issue, especially for boys. But it is. It can be. But the social part is important, though. So if you're friends with his friends or his friends' parents, if you can find ways to get all the friends together, or maybe he has friends that are playing some sports or doing some activity, that can help. Because again, if you have your friends that are doing it, that's going to make you want to do it even more. So I think that was one thing that you touched on. And then another couple little things that I've had parents that have done, which is kind of creating a reward system. So it's like, all right, fine, you don't like exercise, but you get some kind of reward for doing like this workout, X times a week or whatever. So maybe something like that might help. Again, these are more superficial. It's not going to change the mental part, but it might get him to do it more. And then maybe the one thing is, if you exercise and you see results, then the results are what will make you want to continue. So I've also seen kids, the one time where I've had kids who have been not motivated, but then started to really get into it, is they're not motivated. They're also, at 13, your body's changing. So you're exercising, all of a sudden you start, oh wow, I have some muscles, I have some abs. And then that might get them to think, wow, well, if this is what happens when I exercise a little bit, what's going to happen when I do more? Yeah. So that part might also help. So there might be that effect of, the results will make them want to exercise more. So I think we beat this up a little bit.
It's actually a very interesting and fascinating question, all the stuff that goes into it. Yeah. So, well, Dava, let us know how it goes. I hope everything works out. And we're very happy that you want to get your son into this. Kids are stuck on their computer screens and the video games. Getting them out there is so... I worry about kids nowadays and that they're too much of it. So I think it's wonderful that you want to do this. So, all right. Next question. Oh, look. Some comes from a guy named Justin. I like this guy's name. And it says, I often see people doing improper form while lifting, and I feel like I should let them know that it's not good for them. What's the protocol for giving advice at the gym? And then he says, I'm not a personal trainer.
That's a touchy subject. I feel like we've talked about it before. You really have to be careful with, because it's not your responsibility and it's not your scope to tell them. So it's tricky. Now, if you're, in general, like if you're talking in general, if you're talking about kind of gym etiquette, it's not wrong to correct somebody, especially if you think they're doing it wrong. The problem is just, are they going to be receptive to it, and how you approach it, and how they accept you approaching them. So you kind of have to feel out the situation. I think just right off the bat, you kind of have to looking at their body language. Are they going to be receptive to what you're going to tell them, or are they going to push back? I think that's one thing to think about. Will they get defensive? Will they be open? I've seen situations where people are really open to hearing advice. There are plenty of people who don't know what they're doing, and they're aware of it, and they want people to help them. And a lot of times people are just in the gym kind of doing whatever they can think of. So often people will be very receptive. But on the flip side, there are people who are who are closed off, and they don't want advice. They don't want you to tell them they're doing it wrong. They don't care. And so they'll get standoffish or worse. So I think you have to kind of right off the bat make a judgment call about whether or not it's an appropriate situation. I would say if there's a trainer there, your best bet is to go to the trainer or the floor monitor and maybe say, hey, what that person's doing looks a little weird. Is that normal? Is that okay? Can you talk to them? Because then if you're a professional, you have a little bit more authority to approach that situation. I think the first step might be find a professional and ask them. If you're going to approach them.
That's weird too, though.
It is weird, but that's better sometimes than if
tattling on someone for having bad form.
But I mean, it does happen often enough that I would say if you're a regular, there are plenty of people who have a great deal of knowledge to share and experience that may not be professional trainers, but they can help. So I think, but the person receiving that information may not be as receptive to, Joe whatever in the gym versus the trainer, or so it might be best to go to the trainer or go to a trainer and ask them to help the person. But if you're going to approach them, again, you have to make a judgment call about whether or not they're going to be receptive. And then if you make the decision of that they are, then when you do approach them, I think you have to be very, approach them politely, say, hey, I saw you doing that. Do you mind? Can I talk to you about it, or can I give you? I maybe find a better way. Can I tell you an alternative? I forget there was better wording for this. I'm not thinking about this.
Well, what I said was, it's funny because it happened to me recently. I was at the gym and I saw someone doing tricep extensions. Standing tricep extensions, and it was really awkward because he was doing them with two separate dumbbells, and his back was bent back, and it was it was just really weird, and he wasn't extending his arms at the right distance, like one was being extended more than the other. It was just did not look good. And it's understandable. Doing his tricep extensions with two separate dumbbells seems like not a great idea for a beginner, because one arm is probably stronger than the other. So you want to distribute the weight. That's just a really weird exercise anyway. A double dumbbell tricep extension. So I'd never done that. So I said, hey, that's
not a bad exercise. But you have to be flexible, and you have to hold the right position. So there can be challenges with it. There are a lot of challenges.
I don't know if it's a beginner exercise, though.
Again, it depends on the person, how they're doing it. But it's not the best exercise in the world. There are better ways to work the triceps. But if done right, it can be done.
If done right. So, and I said to him basically just like this. I said, if I may, I do similar exercises, but I love to do it with one dumbbell. For me, it helps me distribute the weight better, and that just works well for me. And he wasn't not receptive to it, but he said, and I don't give advice often, but he said the same thing that I've gotten almost every time I've given advice. Do you know what it is?
Works for me?
No.
What?
This is how I've always done it.
Okay.
Even though he looked terrible doing it.
Yeah.
Or is this is what I've always done. There was a time also where I saw someone who looked, and and I try not to be, shove it in my face, look, I'm better than you. I once saw someone doing something really awkward, and he gave me the exact same thing. So you wonder how many times do people go through life just doing these exercises incorrectly.
I got that my first day, like first or second day at the gym, because they go over this with you, how do you because part of as a sales tactic, the way when somebody's doing something wrong, you can approach them to talk to them about what they're doing wrong, and then that plants a seed, and you get to blah, blah. We talked about this. I think I may have even talked about this specific example.
Yeah.
But I had a guy who was doing the behind the neck lat pull downs, which is generally not the best exercise in the world to do, and I talked about it, and his response was, "This is how I've always done it, but I feel this much more than the other one." And again, like we talked about before, then it becomes a risk reward. It's like, okay, well, maybe you feel this more, but this can potentially harm, can potentially injure you. So you have to then you have to make the decision about whether or not it's going to be the best exercise for you. But it basically was kind of the same answer. Yeah. I almost stopped just approaching people with stuff after a few times, because you do get, most people are pretty standoffish. So I kind of have to wait until the person, wait until I know that person's receptive. But I will say one thing, which it sounds like you did, is if you do approach somebody, focus. So everybody gets defensive, even if you're new to the gym and you read some article, in the article was wrong and you're doing it and someone's telling you you're doing it wrong. It's just a natural, again, I'm not a psychologist, but it feels like it's just a natural reaction when someone tells you you're doing something wrong to get a little defensive. Sure. So try to focus on how the modification will help versus why what they're doing is wrong. So like if you're telling somebody, if you do approach someone and say, hey, I might have a better way to do this or a more efficient way to do it. I find that this exercise, and it sounds like you did, when I do it with one arm, it feels better. I'm a little bit better position. I don't have to worry too much about the stabilization of the shoulder. I can use the other arm for support. Like kind of focus on the benefits of doing the modified exercise versus saying, what you're doing is wrong. Your back is in a bad position and the arms you can't stabilize. And if you get into what they're doing wrong, most people will get defensive, even if they are receptive. They start you're being negative. So try to focus on the positive over the negative if you do approach someone. Now, one other thing is make sure, and this is hard to say because no one thinks I'm giving the wrong advice, but you want to make sure that the advice you're giving is right. Because I have often seen people give bad advice. It happens all the time, and so that's worse. So like I said, there are some people who I give kind of a bit of credibility to in the gym who aren't pros because they've been doing it a long time and they have a lot of experience, and they've done their own research and they know a good bit, and as long as you're not giving advice on how to deal with injuries, like if somebody says I have a bad back, it's like, oh, well, this helps with my back. Again, you want to know your own scope. But there are people that are, that can give advice in the gym. But make sure you know what you're giving advice about, and make sure it's within your own scope. Like again, if somebody has an injury, don't tell them how to treat their injuries. Yeah. I don't tell people how to treat injuries, so you certainly shouldn't if you're not, a professional. And know that what you're doing, you are giving the right advice, because again, I see it all the time. I had this happen the other day. And funny enough, like it was in the Muay Thai class, and it was a kid. The kid there. I don't know. He's probably in his 20s. That's sad. You talked about how being a guitar teacher for 20 years. I'm referring to 20-year-olds as kids, but. There's a guy there in class who's been a student for. I basically the one to teach him. I taught him in this fundamentals class, and he's kind of made his progress under me for the most part. And he's been doing it a few months now, and he was throwing his kicks, and I've been working hard with him on how to throw certain types of kicks. And then there's another guy who he was partnered with in class the other day, and the guy who's partnered with actually has a good deal of experience. I think he's fought before. So he's kind of that guy in the gym that's like I said, like the guy that knows his stuff. He kind of would be that guy, but when he corrected something and he did the wrong correction. It's something that I've been working with this kid on for months, and he was telling him to do the exact opposite. So do know, like, make sure you're giving the right advice, because then after, and I'm a little too nice to like go and say, no, you're telling him the wrong thing. So I just waited till after class, and I walked up to the kid. I'm like, hey, listen, what he told you, don't do that, don't follow that. I taught you how to, I taught you what to do for a reason. There's a reason why you do it, and there are different schools of thought on things, but go, for now, you go with what I taught you. This is what my coaches taught me. This is how we do it. So it is funny that.
Yeah, it's funny that whenever if I was to correct someone or do something like that, my fail safe is always, well, you might want to ask them to be sure. Yeah. And my sort of trick to doing it, this is how I do it.
Yeah, well,
I never say you should do it. This is how I do it.
Sometimes,
so if you want to listen, then
also like I've learned from a number of different instructors. Not everyone does everything the same. So at the end of the day, if you're at a gym, whoever's name is on that gym, it ends with them. So whenever even me, like I'll tell people to do things a certain way based on what I've learned from other coaches, and they'll say, well, Koban or Kongnapa told me to do it this way. My response is, well, do what they say. Like it always ends with them. So if they tell you to do it that way, then you do it that way because their names are on the. I'm just helping out. So it's you can listen to what I say, but if they tell you to do it a certain way, then you do it. Now, when it comes to combat sports and weightlifting, I also think this happens with weightlifting too. There's no such thing as perfect form, and so everybody is going to do things a little bit different. And so some things, like some methods of kicking, even the way that this kid was told to kick, it'll work well for some people and it doesn't work for other people. So everybody's got, everyone's going to learn technique differently, and everybody will have things that work well for them and don't based on their size and their body type and their own athletic abilities and the flexibility and all these other variables that are involved that are going to make a decision, determine how you do things. Same thing with form on certain exercises. Like there's no, and this is another episode we'll be talking about it, is I don't think there's such thing as like perfect form. There is the ideal form, but you have to take the person's body into account. And so sometimes people get hyper focused, and this is also something I'll see in the gym too. They get hyper focused on getting the perfect form, and that's not always possible. Like some people, the body is different, and so you have to account for that. So again, think that
I think that covers it.
Covers it, yeah.
All right, so then the last question comes from Brodom, and it is, I was told that deadlifts are one of the best exercises, but they can be dangerous.
Is that a real name?
I guess.
Brodom?
I don't know if it's a real name.
Boredom?
Like Brodom, but I kind of...
you swap the O and the R. That's so weird.
It's probably a username.
Okay. All right, well, cool.
And I was told that deadlifts are one of the best exercises, but they can be dangerous. I was told to do them with the Smith machine and that it would be safer that way. But other people have told me that it isn't as effective. What do you guys think?
All right, deadlifts are a great exercise. They're full body. You're working almost every muscle in the body has to engage for doing deadlifts. They can be dangerous, especially if they're done with improper form. So it's one of those exercises where ideally you have a pro or trainer teach you the proper form, and then on top of that, you want to progress to heavier weights. So don't start, even if you have the form down, work on building your form with moderate weights until you're really comfortable with the exercise. So both of those those first two parts are correct. Like deadlifts are one of the best, but they're also dangerous. So or can be potentially dangerous if done improperly. It can be a lot of strain on the back. I've seen people, the way they do it, put a lot of strain on the back, especially. And as you get to heavier weights, it's just going to be dangerous, no matter how good the form is. So those are pretty much true, but they're not as bad as some people will say they are. You just have to do it with good form. If you do it with bad form, they're very dangerous. If you do it with proper form, not too dangerous. Okay. So, Smith machine is a terrible idea for deadlifts. Yeah. Okay. So for most free weight exercises, you're working with there's a natural arc to the motion. So if you were kind of to trace the motion of the deadlift bar as you're lifting, it's going to trace kind of a natural arc that you're not going to be able to mimic with the straight Smith machine, because the Smith machine just goes straight up and down. Yeah. There's like a Z axis, there's no X or X or Y axis on the Smith machine. So you're just going up and down. You just go up and down in the direction that the Smith machine is going to let you go. Now some are angled a little bit, which helps slightly, but as we just talked about, every physical body is different. So your body may take that bar in a certain motion that somebody else won't. So doing it on a Smith machine, it takes out an element of kind of stability and balance, because you don't have to really control the bar anymore. All you got to do is lift it and drop it. But that's, I think, overstated sometimes. I think more it's just you need to pull. There's an arc that it's got to take that you can't get with the Smith machine. And I think honestly, I I mean, you see people do bench pressing on the Smith machine and squats, which are bad enough.
Yeah. Well, why are they bad? Are they not?
Again,
are
same
they
idea.
Dangerous? Are they not good for your body? Like,
I mean,
'cause you're trying to contort to this weird.
Again, some Smith machines have been are a little bit different in that instead of going straight up and down, now they're designed at a bit of an angle, which makes it slightly more natural. But again, your stabilizer muscles don't work as much because you don't really have to stabilize the Smith machine. You're just moving it in one axis, so one direction. So you don't. So part of it is just stabilizing and controlling the movement. That is a benefit. Again, on a bench press and squats,
it's not really a deadlift.
From what I understand and what I've read, like it can put extra stress on the shoulders. Because again, if you're not taking it through its natural motion arc, then depending on your positioning, you could put more stress on the shoulders than you need to, because your shoulders, as you lower the weight, the joint has to. You're manipulating the joint to put yourself in the best position. A, to actually produce the movement, but B, to protect the joint. And then same thing with the squat. If you're doing a Smith machine squat that's just going straight in one direction, you're not shifting the bar to adjust for the way that your back's positioning. So then that can put extra stress on the back or the hip. It's just not as safe as doing it with the free. It gives a false sense of security because you don't need a spotter.
It's not as safe.
So it's certainly not as safe. I've never even considered doing with a deadlift with the Smith machine, but I'm trying to visualize it, and I'm not sure how. I don't even know if you can do it.
I
gotta think about it. Yeah, I just wouldn't. I would avoid using the. I really would avoid using the Smith machine for most exercises unless you absolutely have to. Again, like I said, I think that the negatives aren't as bad as people say, but I definitely wouldn't do a squat. I definitely wouldn't do a deadlift. I would probably not do bench pressing unless there's
a bench press isn't the end of the world.
There's no other option. Things, and again, they're made slightly better because they're angled now. And then you have some gyms have like the kind of pseudo Smith machine where it's just like you have movement and range. It's just that there's like kind of cables attached to the bar. But I would definitely avoid it for deadlifts. It's not going to make the exercise easier. It'll just give you a false sense of security. Just learn the proper form and do it with lighter weights and build to the heavier weights if that's a goal of yours.
Now, what about if someone's concerned about? Well, yeah, so certainly doing less weight, but what about maybe some variations using kettlebells or dumbbells, or what about the deadlift bar where you hold that one?
Those are all fine.
Like that might make the motion a little easier and less sort of I could see the bar being a little tricky to maneuver around, so maybe using one of the other apparatuses that can help.
Sure, there are many alternatives. So if you have a hard time with straight bar deadlifts, whether it's you have a hard time with your back bar, or if you have a hard time, for some people, if your calves aren't very flexible, or if there's some problems in the lower back as well and the hips too, but more you see it with the calves. If your calves are tight or not very flexible, you'll have a very hard time sitting back fully. So then you'll have a hard time. So with the deadlift bar, it's got to clear your knees, especially if you pull all the way up to the top of the movement to actually lower the bar down. Sometimes you'll have a hard time clearing the knees. So if you have one of those issues, then the alternatives will be holding like dumbbell deadlifts, as you mentioned. There's the deadlift the deadlift bar. You can use kettlebells too. So yeah, there are plenty of other options for doing deadlifts. Yeah, you can do. It's a little
weird.
Tricky.
I've never done it, but I've seen people do it.
Not quite, because again, you think about it, it's a deadlift. You're trying to and the cable's got that angle, which makes it slightly different. So I would stick with free weights.
Yeah.
If your focus is straight leg deadlifts, you can use with cables. That's fine, but that's different. So, So I mean, you have alternatives. So if there's a reason why you can't do deadlifts with the straight bar, there are options. But I would definitely stay away from doing it with the Smith machine.
Not the option.
Yeah, definitely not. Unless you have nothing else. But still, like I've got to actually go try to visualize and try.
I've seen people doing it. It looks weird.
Okay.
Like I was. It looks weird.
It must look weird. I can't imagine it.
I never use it.
Yeah, because think about it. At the end of this deadlift, so the deadlift starts on the bar on the floor, and you have to pull it.
It defeats the purpose.
So I mean, again, it's not the worst. There are certainly times where it can be useful. It's just not the same, and it can be. It's more dangerous, but it has its purpose, and people like it. And it gives a false sense of security, and it is what it is.
Bench press like 600 pounds, and it's not that hard. It's like. But whatever.
All right. Well, I think we've covered everything.
Big one.
Exercise of the week this week is cable flies. Very simple
right.
movement, but it's my
I'm
favorite
doing it.
chest exercise. It's probably the
It's
best.
great.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
best.
wow.
Well, it's not completely, almost isolates the chest. The
great.
chest is a prime
Cool.
mover, and where bench press has a lot of assist. You can do heavier weight with the bench press, but I just feel like cable flies, especially if you kind of cross at the top of the movement.
What? After you're done. Sorry.
And just the angle, the cables, I like cable flies better than dumbbell flies, because it's a little bit easy. You're getting resistance throughout the movement. Where with dumbbells, it gets a little bit easier as you get towards the top, and you can cross the arms over at the top of the movement. I just feel like it's one of the best just chest exercises.
What's the angle? Do you like doing it from like the top, the side,
straight
underneath?
I mean, you could do any
with your
angle,
arms out?
but I like if you're standing straight upright with the cables at about chest level.
Okay.
So you just keep cables
You don't
about
like to
chest
do
or
those
shoulder
people
level.
Sit in a boot.
Sure, there are those
I guess
options
they're all
too.
good, right?
Yeah, they're all good. But
Okay.
they're all good. But you just straight,
Okay.
shoulder height, and straight ahead. Just pull the arm straight forward. Probably my favorite chest exercise.
It's great.
I did that like way more because I was never a big bench pressing guy.
Yeah.
Maybe when I was like 18, 19, when we were starting to lift weights, I tried lifting heavy, but otherwise I didn't do heavy bench pressing. But I did lots of cable flies and probably got heavier on that. Not heavier than I would bench press, but I got pretty heavy with cable flies relative to like my weight on bench presses. It's funny, like for me, even when I would lift weights, like I could do heavy, even bicep curls. Like I could curl like 75, 80 pounds, but for reps, but like I wouldn't bench much more than like 225, which might be heavy for some people, but it's certainly not heavy for weightlifters. I know plenty of people who like they put 225 and they just do reps. And for me, it was like that was like my high end when I was bench pressing. But like I could do heavy cable flies and like heavy like bicep curls for some reason. But I guess I like those exercises more. But yeah, all right, that's it. That's the exercise of the week.
All right, so. Yeah, keep writing us in for anyone whose questions we've answered. We'd love to hear a follow-up. So,
and if we haven't
feel free
answered
to
your
write us
questions,
in.
we had a couple like that were similar. So if it was very similar to somebody else's question, hopefully we answered your question within someone else's question. And as you
feel
see,
free to write us
we
in.
had 5 questions, and this is we're coming on an hour. So
yeah.
all right, well, keep them coming.
Awesome.
That's it. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, a.k.a. Chef Sonic.
We are the Gym
Gym
Wits.
Wits.